Bismillah, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nohana Jiha binti Nur Khair 2015128, and for this presentation, we will discuss three major things, which is introduction, finding and discussion, and lastly conclusion.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 7 and we will discuss about Raden Ajeng Kartini. My name is Huda binti Zulkafali, and first I will explain about Kartini's biography. She was born on 21st April 1879 in Majun, Java, and she died on September 17, 1904. She was the fifth child and the second oldest daughter in a family of 11, including half-siblings of Javanese and royal family, who was the origin of Jepara. She lived in Jepara and then moved to Rembang in central Java. She is the first Indonesian modern thought, and without her thought, Indonesian modern history comprises is nothing. She was known as a national hero who fights for the advancement of women thought in a more advanced place.
Moving on to the educational background of Raden Ajeng Kartini, only until the age of 12, Kartini was allowed to study at ELS Europe's Lazarus School. Here, Raden Ajeng Kartini studied Dutch, and she was very proficient and smart in the language. But her school had to stop because she had to be secluded. Although she was at home, she began to study on his own and wrote letters to correspondence friends who came from the Netherlands. She also learned from European books, newspapers, and magazines. Even though she had to marry and be supported by Raden Adipati Joyodiningrat, it turned out that her husband has allowed and support her to establish a women's movement at that time.
After Kartini died, Mr. J. H. Abandoned, collected and recorded the letters that Raden Ajeng Kartini sent to her friends in Europe. Abandoned at that time served as Minister of Culture, Religion and Crafts of the Dutch East Indies. The book is entitled Door Duisternis tot Licht, which literally means From Darkness to Light. This book was published in 1911 and was printed 5 times. In 1922, Balai Pustaka published it under the name After Dark Comes Lights. In summary, this book tells a lot about the life journey of a female hero named Raden Ajeng Kartini and her letters to her sisters and friends. The contents of the letters are about her aspiration to advance women, her hopes, and her life journey. From the letters that became the book, Kartini's thought was spread, read, studied, and then inspired indigenous women who at that time were considered weak and helpless to become more open. Through her letters, many women are inspired, and in fact, Kartini's struggle itself is a milestone in the awakening of women's power so that they can get their rights and reach their dreams as high as possible.
I will explain about Kartini's thought in social position. There are 4 points that I highlighted. The first point is Javanese custom and tradition. The second point is social issues. The third point is women emancipation, and the fourth point is women position. We will look into more details in these 4 points. The first point is Javanese custom and tradition. We can see that Kartini critique about the customs because there were inequality. We can see there was hierarchy in the family where the younger siblings need to show their respect to the older siblings. For example, they need to bow down while sembah and squat walking if they want to walk in front of them. They also need to use honorific when talking to them. Kartini did not like the tradition, so she asked her younger siblings to talk freely with her. Second point, we will look into the social issue because there was a big difference between the upper class and the lower class. We can see Kartini get her early education at that time because we can see many people, especially women, did not get their early education. Kartini had the privilege to pursue her studies. Her siblings, especially her brother, get to pursue their study and work with the government. Many lower class do not get the opportunity to get education, and because of that they do not get a good job. We can see during that time there was many poverty in the society. Kartini care about the people, and the unfair rules happen between the people who work and the Dutch that colonized Indonesia at that time. In the social context, we can see girls getting married as early as 12 years old, and we will look into more details in the next 2 points. The last 2 points is women emancipation, and the fourth point is women position. Kartini saw women struggle to get freedom, autonomy, and law equation as the part of the wider movement. The word emancipation influenced her thought to make a freedom about the traditions which make sorrow all the women in her era. It started from Kartini's talk about the untrue value which arranged in Javanese tradition. Women and girls being hidden from outside the world when they reached the time of their menstruation. They would be secluded in the house and waited until someone asked them for marriage. They were being locked out and from the outside. It was very different from men where they had more freedom to do that. Either they wanted to pursue their study or to. It was crime when girls went out from their homes and went to the school. For Javanese, girls need to stay at homes, and it was forbidden for them to go anywhere. That's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter.
In Kartini's letters, both addressed to Stella and Mrs. Abandonen especially touch on the position of women in the family, especially to the Javanese noble families. The latter contained Kartini's opinion about women's position, especially wife in relation with husband. Kartini personally strongly opposed the subordinate position of women in the Javanese aristocratic family, even though she did not manage to get out of the shackles of that culture. Marriage is the main focus of her struggle to liberate women. Kartini strongly refused the marriage that was mated. She said that women's voices should be heard when they will be married. Her thoughts about the freedom of women to determine her life partner much poured in her letters to Mrs. Abandonen. Her disapproval of the arranged marriage was written in her letter to Mrs. Abandonen, dated October 7, 90,000. Kartini expressly declared that she would accept her match even though her mind was boiling and raging, but she also said that she was a woman with a mind and head that could think and feel. This phrase indicates that although Kartini didn't refuse her partner's wanted in the end, Kartini was bold so that her freedom of her thought is shackled. Kartini has also refused polygamy before she even received polygamy. It was very strict and loud. Kartini in the same letter stating firmly will not marry. Emotionally, Kartini describes her anger over it when commenting on the marriage of a single grandson of the Priangan region who is educated and wealthy but married to a man who has already 3 wives. Kartini's spotlight in this case is directed at the 3 previous wives of the Bupati. Kartini questioned how the feelings of the previous wives. Kartini can feel the discomfort because her own mother also experienced the same thing. For Kartini, it is an affront to women and must be terminated. That is what is as desirable as stated in the letter. There is nothing that I really desire and desirable except to be allowed and to stand alone. Kartini called polygamy as a sin because it made hurt humans. In this case, Kartini describes that women have no right, all the rights belong to men. A man may take another woman as a legal wife into his wife and children's house, while the wife must accept her rival women. Therefore, Kartini opposes which is regulated in Javanese law and teaching. Kartini wasn't a freethinker who wants to disregard the religion. Exactly, she had the patience to protest inflexible and unopened Islamic precept in the past time. The religion was a life orientation as the completeness the human life. The religion has a source of conviction about the God existence as the light to someone's life. Kartini, in her era, was Islam who was still very plain. It was proven by her statement that in her latest appears her turbulent psychological incomprehend rightness of the religion, as the later to Estella Zihandala below, where she said, the Quran is too holy to be translated into any language whatever. Here no one speaks Arabic. To me, it is a silly thing to be oblique to read something without being able to understand it. Whereas, according to her, if the people read without knowing the meaning, it's mean that they had read just and in nothing. Based on Kartini's statement to Estella, that the Quran just read by the people without they knew what the meaning inside. It was caused in the past where it was very rare to know the Quran's translation. Until Kartini said that Quran over pure to translate, and she considered that every Islamic teacher did not understand what is the meaning of every sentence in the Quran. Actually, Islam came with a very simple way, but she did not fully understand it. In her latest, seemed that she was turbulent to understand the rightness of the religion. And then she states to Dr. Ambandanan in her latest that she more apply content priority than Shariat form. There was the human magnificence which their deed and goodness of the others. She was somewhat religious without holding the Shariat, where the God who had believed was the person's heart, the people goodness, and the people deed.
Moving to the discussion about education based on Kartini's thought, education does not have the narrow meaning. She interpreted education more than teaching and learning. Kartini never belittled about anything happen around her. Since childhood, she has sensitivity to the problems affected by society extraordinarily. And based on Kartini's view, education is not only aimed at educating the ritual activity of the brain, but also moral and spiritual guide. Student skill was important as a provision of life in society. It was proven in her statement above that material and the essential skill which is taught are writing, reading, handiwork, and cooking. There is parallelism statement that the education based on Kartini's thought is the education based on the skill supplies to the future. So, with education skill which is taught by Kartini, indigenous women can develop and make it as a source of livelihood so that they can do anything independently and not dependent on anyone. Teacher is parent for their students, parent who give spirit to their soul. It is Kartini's principle that might be suitable based on her statement, which the teacher is the mother and the mother is not a mother in name but in spirit, educator of the student's soul and their body. For her, education can be done anyway and by anyone. Therefore, the school is not the only education venue because the most important educational based on absolute given to the students is education in the family environment. The most valuable education is education based on planting moral. Within families, moral education is very valuable to be obtained by a child. Accordingly, it can be designed a curriculum that can accommodate the needs to achieve the objective above. It means that the curriculum should contain material that can educate the brain cognitive, the formation of attitude which is affective, and education skills which is psychomotor. Natural sciences such as religious, moral, good example, social sciences, education, and essential skills are taught as a balance between the knowledge and ability of creativity. According to the statements, Kartini is an independent teacher who teach without any limited time, place, material to be taught and avoid to bombard her students with a variety task. According to her, education based on the mind of the task from the teacher is not complete because the most important duties of the teacher is student moral planting. Kartini also assumed that the teacher's treat to students should not have to be forced and arranged arbitrarily. The desire of the students also should be considered in all actions and decisions in the learning process. If seeing of Kartini's letter, in addition, the teacher should treat their students equally. Kartini was a teacher who avoided the bias, as Kartini denounced it. Before that, the Dutch teachers did just treat students based on family rank.
Should have a strong personality as a model for the student. Educating is instilling the values contained in any material which are delivered to the student by the teacher. The values will be more effective if coupled with a good example of their teacher, who will serve as an example for the student. Thus, students are expected to live up to these values and make it a part of the lives of the student themselves. So, the role and the task of the teacher are not stuffing the student with all science only, but act as transfer of values. Based on Kartini's ways in educating, these are few things that we will consider as a teacher to be an educator. Next, the teacher should put themselves as an example for their student, because based on Kartini's principle, teacher is the person who give good example and planting the good character. Other than that, teacher should know their student fully. It is not only about the needs and the learning style, but also the teacher must recognize the qualities, talents and interests of each student. As the person have a different personality and ability with others. So, besides, the teacher also must provide facility of the student to develop their talents and interests. Moreover, the teacher should have a broad knowledge of the material being taught. In addition, the teacher must always learn to increase their knowledge, as the good knowledge of teaching materials or teaching skill improvement to make it more professional. So, to summarize, Kartini is the first Indonesian modern woman who exceeded the nation thing in her era. So, in the Kartini's letter, she shared how she felt with untold conflict, but by her conflict, she can give any contribution to her country. And then she solved the conflict by direct action when she built the school girl education. So, in education, based on Kartini's thought, is totally related with the Kartini's principle in educating the girls with any creative skills and knowledge. So, the critical, important and also the important of education based on Kartini's principle was character education together with the student creative skill to establish the independent woman. Accordingly, Kartini's aspiration should be a vision and mission for the spirit and enhanced by the government to promise as the lamp in the darkness. So for the conclusion, Kartini is the first Indonesian modern woman who exceeded the nation thing in her era. In Kartini's letters, she shared how she felt with untold conflict, but by her conflict, she can give any contribution to her country. At the end, she solved the conflict by direct action when she built schoolgirls' education. So, based on Kartini's thought, education is a principle that educating the girls with any creative skills and knowledge. So, the most important education that based on Kartini's principle was character of education together with the student, creativity, skill, and to establish the independent woman. Accordingly, Kartini's aspiration should be a vision and also a mission spirit by the government to promise as the lamp in the darkness. So that's all from us. Thank you.